every year at Davos, the first question I ask you is, what is your call for this year? So for 2013, what is your outlook in terms of the global economy?
It's an outlook where the average growth rate of the global economy is going to be about 3%, but that's the average of emerging markets growing robustly, close to trend, around 5%, while advanced economies are going to be growing barely 1%, and within advanced economies, the Eurozone is going to be mostly in a recession. Even the UK is borderline in a recession, and even the United States, that compared to other advanced economies growing, in my view, is going to grow another year of anemic, subpar, below trend growth of a barely 1.6, 1.7%, so a rate that keeps the unemployment rate very high.
Unemployment remaining very high in the U.S., that's your outlook. For the United States, you've talked about the concern over the U.S. hitting stall speed. Now that we have reached a deal on the fiscal cliff in Washington, do you still believe that 2013 could see the worst to come for the United States? You've been warning of that.
Well, we reached a mini deal on the taxes on January 1st, but as you know, we kicked the cliff down the road in terms of the debt ceiling, of the sequester, and the continued resolution that are going to come up by end of February, early March. There is still a risk that there is not an agreement, that we go into a sequester, into shutting down the government, in worries about hitting the debt ceiling and then tension occurring. And even if we reach an agreement, and the agreement is going to be to kick the problem down the road by another 6 months, because there's not going to be a grand bargain on the fiscal side, this year we're going to have, between tax increases and spending cuts, at least 1.4% fiscal drag. Now, if the economy was growing robustly, say above trend, 3.5%, and you get a fiscal drag of 1.4 for a year, big deal, you grow 2% for a year. But the economy has been growing barely 2%. So you subtract 1.4 from the fiscal, and you get to something closer to a stall speed, 0.6. Right. Now, my baseline is not 0.6, it's 1.6, because why? We have some recovery of housing, we have some shale gas stimulus, we have, the economy slightly recovering with jobs and manufacturing, we have the effect of quantitative easing, number 3. But when you all add it up, you still get a mediocre, subpar, below trend, 1.7% growth. That is really one that is not enough.
Before we reached a fiscal cliff deal in Washington, you had said, look, 2013 could be a perfect storm in the United States. And it sounds like your economic outlook for the U.S. was more dire than it is now. But how gloomy is your outlook for the United States at this point? How concerned should people be?
Well, when I spoke about the risk, and was not my baseline, was the downside scenario for the global economy, I spoke about the perfect storm, and that perfect storm was one in which there was absolutely no agreement on the debt ceiling and on the fiscal and the taxes, in which the Eurozone train wreck accelerates, one in which China gets closer to a hard landing rather than a soft landing, and where in the Middle East the tension between Iran and Israel flare into an actual conflict. Now, if all of those 4 things were to happen, you'll have just a perfect storm. Now, even if 1 or 2 of those things were to happen, that's enough to tip the global economy in the wrong place. Specifically in the United States, as I said, we avoided the cliff, but we pushed the problem down the line for sequester, debt ceiling, and continued resolution. There'll be further disagreement. We're not going to reach a grand bargain on revenue and entitlement reform. So they're going to extend the debt ceiling by 3 months or by 6 months, and they're going to agree on a little bit of spending cuts and so on. That means the gridlock in Congress is severe. The Democrats are vetoing entitlement reform. The Republicans are vetoing tax increases, and that stalemate and gridlock is going to continue. And the bond vigilantes are asleep at the wheel. In Europe, they forced them to do fiscal austerity. In the U.S., rates are low, and they're going to stay low for many reasons. So there's no market pressure for the political system to break the gridlock. So we're going to continue on unsustainable economic and fiscal policies for years to come, until then something's going to crack eventually.